العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين. It is the first night of Muharram. The revolution of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is a great treasure for us, and it is important for us to remember the movement of Imam Hussain. Inshallah, during the next following nights, we're going to have and talk about this overall theme about how to become Hussaini. Because some of us remember Imam Hussain, but at the end of the 10 nights or 10 days, we are still the same person that we were. Inshallah, every night we're going to talk about some of the stages, about looking at Ashura as a spiritual journey. And at the end of the journey is Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So tonight and the following nights, we're going to talk about this overall theme of how to become Hussaini, how to become similar to Imam Hussain. We know that those that become the greatest companions of the 12th Imam are those that are the most similar to him, and they have acquired the attributes of the 12th Imam. Inshallah, after these 10 nights, after reflection and after action, we can take a step towards becoming more like Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But before we start this spiritual journey or talk about this spiritual journey, it is important to note that there's also the manners and the outside, the zahir of Ashura that needs to be kept and saved. These majalis that we have, these brothers and sisters that are helping out, that are volunteering to have a majlis, have a commemoration service for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, this is obligatory, this is important for us. Not only is Ashura has this inner side that we connect with Allah, we reach the entire purpose of man's creation, which is connection to Allah, but also it has this external factor that just remembering Imam Hussain, just bringing and having majalis for Imam Hussain is very important itself. When we look at the Quran in Surah Al-Jum'ah, we read, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. In the Quran in Surah Jum'ah, it talks about one of the reasons, the 4 reasons why Allah has sent us the prophets. It talks about the philosophy behind prophethood. One of those, it says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, the first thing. To recite the signs of Allah, to recite the Quran for them. Later on it comes and says, you teach them the Quran, teach them hikmah, teach them knowledge, purify them. But in the first stage it talks about recite to them the verses. Because just this recitation of the verses of Quran is enough for us to become guided at the beginning. When somebody is presented with the verse of Quran, especially back then when they heard Arabic and they learned a new Arabic, and they heard a verse of the Quran, they were moved and changed. In the same way, the Ahlul Bayt, they are also the verses and they are also the ayahs of the Quran. They're also the ayahs, the signs of Allah. As the narration goes that Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I am the great sign of Allah. So reciting and remembering these signs of Allah itself, even without teaching, even without purification, just the presentation of the signs of Allah, it is enough to wake somebody up. 2 brothers, they say, came to one of the ulama in Tehran, Ayatollah Khansari, which is a great alim. He passed around 30 years ago. He was one of the ulama that when they came to the great Marja Ayatollah Burujerdi for the bazaar of Tehran, they brought him. He recommended him to go to Tehran and to become a spiritual guide, and was a mujtahid in Tehran. These 2 brothers, one of them said to Ayatollah Khansari, he said, guide, I want you to give some advice to my brother. Ayatollah Khansari said something interesting to him. He said this, he said, have your brother who he was a thug, he was a violent person, he would drink alcohol. He said, take him to the shrine of Imam Hussain. Before my words can have an effect, take him to the shrine of Imam Hussain and see if when he goes to the shrine, is he moved or is he not? And we're talking about presenting the verses or presenting the signs of Allah, even without teaching, even without anything else, just presenting the signs of Allah. So he took him. He took his brother to Karbala. His brother that was into alcohol, that was into violence, he took him to Karbala, and he said to his brother, he's reciting the Idhn al-Dukhul, the permission to enter the shrine of Imam Hussain. While he's reciting the permission to enter, he sees his brother's crying already. His brother that he wanted to be changed. He comes closer to the shrine of Imam Hussain. He sees that his brother starts weeping. He comes close to the dari as if he's a child and he's lost his mother. And that person, just from that ziyarat, later on changed his life. And he became a very well-known and influential person, just by being presented the signs of Allah. Because the love of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, brothers and sisters, is fitri. It's in us. If we're purified, if we realize and contemplate, just being presented with Ashura is enough to be guided. That's why tonight I want to talk about why it's important just to remember Muharram and have majalis and commemoration for Imam Hussain. Some people have questions. Some of the youth, they might have questions. Us as parents or brothers, sisters, friends, we need to address some of these questions. Why should we remember an event that happened 1400 years ago? And this is part of the first stage about becoming Hussaini, is first remembering the external and the zahir of Ashura. Please recite a salawat. Some of these questions are from the Farsi book Azarakhsh Digar dar Asaman Karbala. I don't think it's been translated yet, but those that can read it, they can refer to it. So the first question is that youth have, some of them have, is why should we remember something that happened 1400 years ago around? Why should we remember the martyrdom of Imam Hussain? Every year there's a lot of money spent, a lot of energy spent to remember Imam Hussain. Why do we even do it? A young kid might ask. Some of the answers that the parents give, it has thawab, it has reward, you get shafa'at. It might not be enough. A child wants to learn more. Why should I remember Imam Hussain? To answer this question, it is a question that can be, it's more easier answered than the questions that we're going to address after this question. Basically, when we look at the way that we want to answer these type of questions, there's two paths to answer questions. One is the path of intellect and reasoning. The other path is the path of following the narrations and following the biographies of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. So we can answer in both ways, by a rational argument or looking at the lives of rational people, or answering it by following what did the prophets and imams do, because whatever they have done is a proof for us. They are prophets, they're the ambassadors from Allah, and they came to teach us what to do and what not to do. But a rational person, when he looks at different societies and different cultures, he sees that every culture, they remember influential figures, they remember important figures that have contributed to society. They haven't forgotten them. They might either put them in their currency, they might either write books about them, they might have monuments or streets or hospitals or different buildings named after them. But they basically remember those figures that have helped society. Either they might be an inventor, a politician, a religious figure. But they basically, when you go throughout, look at different countries and histories, you see that people have preserved their heritage and the legacy of their heroes and their important figures. When we look at Imam Hussain alayhi salam, we see that he has been given one of the greatest tests, as it says in Ziyarat Ashura, the greatest tests and bala in Islam. and he has sacrificed for this test, and he has contributed by saving Islam through his pure blood. Aren't we in debt to Imam Hussain to remember him? That he took himself, his children, his family, his companions, and separated darkness from light, and allowed people to see the path, the misguidance that happened after the Prophet of Islam. And that if Imam Hussain alayhi salam didn't revolt, it would have still been very, very unclear for people. Don't we owe to such great figures that we remember them? And however manner or fashion, we're not talking about which manner yet, but isn't it important, aren't we in debt to them, that we should remember their lives and the legacies of such people? So this is, of course, yes, and this happens throughout the different countries, through different cultures. They remember the influential figures or important figures of their that have contributed to their society. The second question that the youth might have, and this question is a little bit more complicated, and maybe people that see Islam from outside, they see us beating our chests, they see us wearing black, doing different types of, azadari, having different majalis for Imam Hussain. They say, okay, I agree with you. We remember our important figures too. But you, as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, you remember it in a different fashion. You have a different manner when you remember Imam Hussain alayhi salam. You hit yourselves, you cry. We don't do this. So a young person might ask this question: why do we remember Imam Hussain in this way? Why do we have to do it this way, with these majalis and sina zani and crying? To answer this question, we need to look at the different factors that are inside, the different components that are inside humans. We have our intellectual side, and we also have our emotional side. Once we agree that yes, all societies should remember important figures, we should ask this: shouldn't we then benefit from this figure completely or incompletely? If we're going to benefit from Imam Hussain alayhi salam completely, then we both use our intellect, we also use our emotions. We need to talk about Imam Hussain, we need to write about Imam Hussain, we need to read about Imam Hussain, analyze what were the circumstances that caused the people to kill the grandson of the Prophet. True, we agree. But also we should remember the emotional side of humans. And as the great teacher Shahid Mutahari says, the emotional side is compared to a car, is like the engine of the car. Our intellect is like the headlights. It doesn't allow us to stray. It doesn't allow us to go through a dangerous path. We see there's a cliff. But the movements that humans comes out, the component that pushes humans is the emotional side. Is love, for example. Love pushes somebody. It's not just intellectual. If somebody is intellectual only, they might be stagnant. But the love of Imam Hussain and the emotional side of Imam Hussain, this is what actually moves us towards this journey of becoming Hussaini. This moves us towards the journey of becoming close to Allah and benefiting from Imam Hussain. When we look at the Quran, there's a story that shows this. When you look at the Quran, and Prophet Musa alayhi salam has this story where he goes to meet Allah. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلَةً وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ فَتَمَّ مِيقَاتُ رَبِّهِ 40 لَيْلَةً. So 40 days he had a meeting with Allah in the Quran. And then when he's meeting Allah, what happens to his people when he's meeting Allah? They fall back to polytheism, to shirk again. When he is meeting Allah, Musa alayhi salam, he knows there's news that his people have becoming misguided again. But when he comes back down, and I'm showing this is the example of the difference between seeing something and hearing it. When he comes back down, he sees for himself with his own eyes, he sees them practice polytheism. There he heard, but then when he sees, he has this reaction. The Quran says, وَأَلْقَى عَلَى الْوَاهِ. He throws the tablets down. وَأَخَذَ بِرَأْسِ أَخِيهِ يَجُرُّهُ عَلَيْهِ. and he takes his brother and pulls him towards his head. This is the reaction of Prophet Musa alayhi salam when he sees polytheism compared to when he hears about it. So when you see the remembrance of Imam Hussain, you see the black, you see the eulogies, the poetry, you hear it, and you see ourselves crying and hitting, you're experiencing Ashura. You are benefiting it from your emotional side, not only from your intellectual side. So for us to completely benefit from Ashura, and we said that we're in debt to Imam Hussain, and that it is logical for society to remember figures that have benefited society and to also learn from the lessons of that person. We need to remember Imam Hussain from our intellect as well as our emotions. Please give a salawat. And the third thing I would like to add is that also we mourn this type of emotion now. Some might say, why aren't you happy? Each remembrance should correlate with that event. If Ashura was a very happy event, yes, then we would have Eid and say like Ghadir and be joyful. But after there's so much bala, and after there's blood and martyrdom and captivity, then remember Imam Hussain in the same manner. The remembrance has to relate with the event. It is a sad event, so we remember it sadly. Remembering Imam Hussain now alayhi salam through the teachings of the prophets and the imams. We said this was a rational argument about why we should remember Imam Hussain. But now let's look at the prophets and let's look at the lives of the holy imams. See, did they remember Imam Hussain, or how some people say it was maybe the Safavid dynasty, or it was different rulers that brought this azat, authority, or this commemoration for Imam Hussain for us. There's a story in Amali al-Saduq. Shaykh al-Saduq has this book, and in this book, Ibn Abbas narrates from Imam Ali alayhi salam this story. The story is like this. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, I'm using this to prove that all the prophets remembered Imam Hussain and cried for Imam Hussain. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Jesus alayhi salam, he was going through Karbala in this narration. When he's going through Karbala, he sits and begins to cry. The Hawariyun, the disciples of Isa alayhi salam, they also sit down and start crying. فَجَلَسَ عِيسَى عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ وَجَلَسَ الْحَوَارِيُّونَ مَعَهُ فَبَكَى وَبَكَى الْحَوَارِيُّونَ وَهُمْ لَا يَدْرُونَ لِمَا جَلَسَ وَلِمَا بَكَى. They don't know even why they're crying, but they see their master Isa alayhi salam is crying, they begin to cry. And they say, Ya Ruh Allah wa kalimata, ma yubkik. Why are you crying, Isa alayhi salam? Why are you crying in this land? قال أتعلمون أي أرض هذه؟ قالوا لا. قال هذه أرض يقتل فيها فرخ الرسول. Do you not know what land this is? This is the land where the son of the Prophet will be killed. The son of the Prophet Ahmad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. وَفَرْخُ الْحُرَّةِ الطَّاهِرَةِ الْبَطُولِ. And then he mentions Sayyidah Fatima salamullah alayha. He says also the son of Fatima will be killed here. Then he says something interesting in this narration. Shabihata ummi. She is similar to my mother Maryam alayhi salam. She's similar to my mother. وَيُلْحَدُ فِيهَا. And they will be killed there. So Isa alayhi salam is passing through Karbala and he begins to cry and the Hawariyun cry. Look at the narration from Al-Kamil fi Tarikh, which is not a Shia source. This is a Sunni source. It's a Sunni historian. He says that the Prophet of Islam also cried for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So when you hear these stories, Isa alayhi salam cries, the Prophet cries, isn't it an indication that we should cry and have majalis for Imam Hussain alayhi salam? The Prophet of Islam is given dirt. Jibreel, Angel Jibreel gives the dirt of Karbala to the Prophet in this narration from Al-Kamil al-Tarikh of Ibn Athir, and gives it to his wife Salama and says to observe this soil. When this soil becomes red, Imam Hussain, my grandson, will be killed. So when Imam Hussain alayhi salam goes from Medina, from Mecca to Karbala, she starts observing the soil because Imam Hussain is in danger. Observes, and then on the day of Ashura, that soil becomes covered with blood. This is from a Sunni source, not a Shia source. She wept loudly, and the women of Medina joined her and cried with her. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, the son of Imam Hussain, again a person that was one of those that continuously cried and wept for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They say there's a story that they saw in the gutter from where rain drains. They saw that water would flow through the gutter and then stop. Water would flow and stop. And they look and they see that it's Imam Sajjad alayhi salam and that he is going to do wudu. He looks at the water, he begins to cry and remember the thirst of Imam Hussain, and he spills the water out of crying. Again, he pours more water in a bowl to do wudu again, to do ablution again, and then he remembers Imam Hussain, and again he spills it. So Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, look at the life of Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. He had majalis for Imam Hussain, similar to the majalis we have today. We have brothers one side, sisters one side. He had majalis and he had somebody that spoke, that did eulogies, that did poetry for Imam Hussain. The name of Kumayt al-Asadi, he recited poetry. Imam Baqir alayhi salam had majalis. And after the poetry was done, Imam Baqir alayhi salam grabs the hands of Kumayt and says, "May God forgive the previous sins and the future sins of Kumayt." So this is the emphasis that the Ahlul Bayt gave to remember Ashura. We keep going, Imam after Imam, Imam after Imam, they remembered Ashura, not only all the prophets. Ashura, my brothers and sisters, is not only a movement of Imam Hussain. It started with the prophets. It started with the Prophet of Islam, with Imam Ali, Sayyid Fatima, Imam Hassan. They all partook in Ashura and then was preserved by the later Imams, Imam Sajjad, Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. The later Imams, they preserved it. So it is a work that all the Imams had together. From Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, this narration, there is none who recites poetry about Imam Hussain and weeps and makes others weep by means of it, except that Allah makes paradise incumbent for him and forgives his sins. The next Imam, Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, it's recorded that Imam Rida alayhi salam said, when it was the first of Muharram, I would observe that my father would not be seen laughing. He would not laugh anymore. Sadness would overtake him. And day by day, he would become more mahzoon, or in grief more. And finally, Imam Rida alayhi salam, we also have, he had this famous poet that would only recite for the Ahlul Bayt, Da'bil al-Khuzai. And Da'bil al-Khuzai would recite for Imam Hussain some of the very famous poetries that even today in Arab communities they recite for the majalis of Imam Hussain. It comes from Da'bil, from the majalis of Imam Rida alayhi salam. And Imam Rida alayhi salam would tell Da'bil this: "Marhaba for the person that aids us with his hands and tongue." In another story, they say that Da'bil asked, or Imam Rida alayhi salam gave him his own shirt, the shirt that he had performed salats and recited the Quran. And Da'bil gets this shirt because he had recited for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Later on, people find out that he has the shirt of Imam Rida. And later on, they attack this shirt, and the different parts of the shirt they take for shafa. And they say that some of it was taken to different parts of the city, and that shirt itself was shafa, was cured the sick. So brothers and sisters, when we look at Ashura and we look at the way that we want to remember and the manners that we want to remember Imam Hussain alayhi salam, it's important to know we have these two ways to prove why we should remember Imam Hussain in this fashion. One is through rational argument, through saying that societies, they remember their important figures and they benefit from their lessons. But we also said that we have an emotional side, and for us to truly benefit, we should also bring out our emotions, our spirituality, and connect with Imam Hussain. Then we said that the prophets, from Adam alayhi salam, the prophets, Prophet Isa alayhi salam, to our prophet, they remembered Imam Hussain, and this was a work that collectively they did together to bring this movement and this occurrence called Ashura happen for us. Please recite a salawat. And sometimes just remembering and saying, remembering Imam Hussain, even if somebody might not truly understand what's going on, because of the light and the nur of Imam Hussain, it is enough to get guided. That's why it's important to have these majalis for Imam Hussain. The light. A person might come and sit down. I myself, there is a story that one of my friends, he brought a tourist, it was in Iran. He brought a tourist to one of the majalis. It was for the martyrdom of Hazrat Fatima salamullah alayha. And this person was very afraid because he came with a tour to Iran, and some people, they're afraid maybe they're going to kidnap him or something might happen bad to them. So he came, my friend told him, come, if you want to see Shiism, come to this hayat, come to this majlis. And he came there, and I explained, I met him, and he was from Europe, one of the countries in Europe, and I explained to him that this is the martyrdom of Fatima Zahra. She plays a very important role in Islam. Maryam has a very important role in Christianity. Fatima has a very important role in Islam. And he didn't even understand Farsi. But he sat there for such a long time, it probably took 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours. And I kept thinking over and over, okay, he's probably tired, he wants to leave. My friend was telling him, they're going to turn off the lights so you don't get afraid, they're not going to kidnap you or whatever. So after these 2 or 3 hours, I was expecting him to be asleep. Or I said, what happened? And he said, it was great, mashallah. He really enjoyed it. For 2 or 3 hours, remembering the Lotmiya, the Rosa of Sayyida Fatima. Because why? It has this nur. It has this light. The Ahlul Bayt are light. Those that remember them, they get light inside their hearts. Those that do ziyarat of them, they get light inside them. Those that remember them, they get light. One of the needs that we have, not only do we have needs for physical needs or emotional needs, we also have this need for nur and light. And that's why when we don't have this feeling, sometimes we might feel depressed. We might think that something's going wrong. The Ahlul Bayt are nur, their kalam is nur. When we remember them, and even though some people might not truly understand what's going on, there's this attraction. There's this fire that won't turn off until the day of judgment. Why? Because it's their light, their nur. And people are being attracted to the Ahlul Bayt, to the movement of Imam Hussain because of the light of it, because of the nur. Even though they might not completely understand what's happening, but it's that spiritual connection they have, that they have this very good feeling, even though you cry and you're expressing sadness. But in this sadness, there's joy. And that joy is that connection with God. That joy is that light. Because whenever you're filled with darkness, your body is tired, even though you don't feel it. You feel like, what's wrong with me? I don't feel right. But once you feel that nur in these majalis, you feel very happy, even though you were crying maybe for 1 hour. So brothers and sisters, this remembering the Ashura, having the commemoration services for Imam Hussain, it itself gives people a chance to experience and taste this nur and this light. And this nur and light is what will guide us, inshallah. If we can dim the lights, tonight is the first night of Muharram. It is the night that it's known to remember Muslim ibn Aqil, the ambassador, the cousin, the courageous representative of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Please recite a salawat. Musab ibn Aqil alayhi salam was martyred in the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, but it's a tradition to remember him in the 1st of Muharram because he is part of the Ashura movement. After Muslim ibn Aqil was martyred, also Maysam Tammar was also martyred in the 23rd of Dhul Hijjah too. He is also part of the movement of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Muslim ibn Aqil was, as we said, the ambassador. He was somebody that was loved by Imam Hussain. In some of the narrations it says this, that when Imam Hussain alayhi salam heard he loved Muslim this much, when he heard he was martyred, Imam Hussain alayhi salam says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Then says this sentence, La khayra fil aishi ba'da ha'ula'i. After Muslim was martyred, he says, there's no khair in life anymore. This is the love that Imam Hussain has for his companions. It's not only one way, it's not one-sided. Just how you love Imam Hussain also loves you. And we'll show these instances in the Maqatil that not only when his family members were martyred did Imam Hussain alayhi salam have such statements, but when his companions and friends were killed, he says, La khair. There is no khair in life anymore after these people, after Muslim. There's no khair in this world. So Muslim ibn Aqil was sent to Kufa to observe what was going on in Kufa. And there, at the beginning, the Kufans, they come to Muslim ibn Aqil, maybe 18,000, and some historical figures say 18,000 people come to him and say, we are ready, and that Imam Hussain should now come to Kufa and establish his movement in Kufa. There, Muslim ibn Aqil writes a letter to Imam Hussain alayhi salam and telling him that the situation is good in Kufa. It's time for you to come. But when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, Yazid hears of this, and he sends Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to Kufa, and there, maybe with only 500 people, he begins to show his power and frighten people. People begin to abandon Muslim ibn Aqil, the Kufans. And first he was at the home of Mukhtar, then he goes into the home of Hani. Then they keep imprisoning people, and then he's left without a home. And there Muslim ibn Aqil, in one of the stories, it says that one of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam by the name of Sharik, he was there with Hani and tells Muslim ibn Aqil this, that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is coming to the house of Hani. Let's go and hide behind, and when I give you this, when I recite this poetry, come out and strike Ibn Ziyad, kill him, so the movement of Imam Hussain will progress. When Ibn Ziyad comes to visit Sharik, there it says that he doesn't strike Ibn Ziyad. Why? Because he then later tells this narration from the Prophet that we don't assassinate people that come to our homes, we don't assassinate them. And that Hani was not the owner of the home, he was not satisfied. He was not happy. He didn't want him to be killed in his house. This is the mannerisms of the movement of Imam Hussain. It wasn't that to get power for any reason or through any means possible. It was with adab and manners. That even somebody like Ibn Ziyad is a guest. You don't come from behind and strike him like a coward. But they came and they attacked Muslim ibn Aqil. And as it says in the Maqatil, here he becomes similar to his master Imam Hussain. How does he become similar? I'll read for you in this maqtal. It says, وَجَعَلَ يُقَاتِلُ حَتَّى أُثْخِنَ بِالْجَرَاحِ وَضَعُفَ عَنِ الْقِتَالِ. There, Muslim ibn Aqil is fighting, courageous like a lion. And he becomes tired after fighting. He becomes tired, وَتَكَاثَرُوا عَلَيْهِ, and they keep coming and coming. He was one person, he was alone. فَجَعَلُوا يَرْمُونَهُ بِالنَّبْلِ وَالْحِجَارَةِ. They come and they start throwing rocks at him. The representative of Imam Hussain, these same people that wrote letters, they begin to throw rocks at him. فَقَالَ مُسْلِمٌ وَيْلَكُمْ مَا لَكُمْ تَرْمُونَنِي بِالْحِجَارَةِ كَمَا تُرْمَى الْكُفَّارِ. Just like you throw it at unbelievers, or you treat me as an unbeliever, you're throwing rocks at me. وَأَنَا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ الْأَبْرَارِ. I am from the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet. وَيْلُكُمْ مَا تَرْعُونَ الْحَقَّ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَذُرِّيَّتِهِ. Don't you see the rightness in the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt? So how is Muslim ibn Aqil similar to Imam Hussain alayhi salam? When we read on the day of Ashura, when Imam Hussain, his companions were killed, وَبَغِيَ وَحْدَهُ, and he was alone, Imam Hussain was alone. In the same words in Arabic, وَقَدْ أُثْخِنَ بِالْجَرَاحِ فِي رَأْسِهِ وَبَدَنِهِ, and Imam Hussain was tired from the wounds that he had in his head and his body. فَجَعَلَ يُضَارِبُهُمْ بِسَيْفِهِ وَهُمْ يَتَفَرَّقُونَ عَنْهُ يَمِينًا وَشِمَالًا. But still Imam Hussain would attack the enemy and they would escape to the right and escape to the left. فوقف الحسين عليه السلام وقد ضعف عن القتال أتاه حجر على جبهته حشمه. There the enemies of God, they attacked the same way that Muslim ibn Aqil was stoned and rocks were thrown at him. Imam Hussain, a rock hits his head and his forehead is split. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيُّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. We ask you, Ya Allah, because of the honor of Imam Hussain, because of the honor of Muslim ibn Aqil, allow us to, inshallah, commemorate in this Muharram the Ashura of Imam Hussain in the way that you are pleased, inshallah. Ya Allah, allow us to benefit from the core and the inside and the nur and the light of Ashura. Ya Allah, we ask you, those that are in trouble in the world, those that have pains, the Muslims in Burma, those Muslims in all throughout the world, that they need our dua to, inshallah, help them escape from oppression, inshallah. Ya Allah, the sick, those that are family members that have passed away, those brothers that need our du'as, inshallah, Ya Allah, relieve their grief, inshallah, and cure them. Ya Allah, make us of the companions of the 12th Imam with his salawat, inshallah.